Hello and welcome back to the Right Brain Podcast.
Yes.
We switch up the sides to keep you guys on our toes.
Did we?
On your toes.
Or maybe we didn't.
Well, we always yeah. Oh, that's true. My dad and I are very matchy in our button t-shirts today.
Well, your stripes are going this way, mine are going this way, but yes.
That's a good point. Okay, so I think today we're going to talk about interoception.
It's one of my favorite topics in the world, especially right now. I've been obsessed with this interoception.
It's pretty fascinating. He and I, we went to dinner last night and kind of got to talking about it like pretty naturally because I feel like I had like a bunch of questions and it seemed like they all kind of came back to this one thing. So I'm actually excited to do this episode mostly because I feel like I'm going to be learning as well.
Yeah, it is such a cool area and it has something to do with, whether you're right brain delayed, whether you're left brain delayed, right brain strong, or the interoception is such an important thing. So what is interoception? Interoception is basically the feeling of your internal feelings. So kind of like one definition is like anything under the skin, right, is where. But if you want to really be more specific, interoception is certain feelings or sensations, and they're basically the most basic and earliest sensations that a child has. As we talked about, the right brain develops or takes the lead in development first. So in the womb and for the first 3 years, the right brain is taking the lead. And it shouldn't be too much and it shouldn't be too little. And then the left brain should come on and for the next 3 years. And at the end of 6 years, we should have a pretty balanced and integrated brain, and the two sides of the brain are different. So the right brain, as we said, the first thing that needs to be there is we need to survive. So part of survival is being able to feel and monitor our body. So a baby right from the beginning needs to be able to let their parent know when they're in pain, when they're hungry, when they're thirsty, when they're hot, cold, when they need to be changed or when they go into the bathroom. Hunger, thirst, and tired. And smell and taste are intimately involved. So all of those sensations really fall under the heading of interoception. So if you're feeling pain in your body or your stomach hurts or you feel your heart beating really fast or all of those, feeling hot, feeling cold, your ability to monitor those basic things. And there's an area of the brain, which is a fascinating area called the insula. And we have a left and right insula, of course, but the right insula is developing first. And in the brain itself, the brain builds from the bottom up and kind of grows that way. So in the most internal core part of our brain, of our cortex, is the insula. So it's the first area of our brain to really develop. And so there's really basic things there. But there's different parts of it. So it borders the frontal lobe, the temporal, and the parietal lobe, and there's different parts of it. Okay. And there's a front and back of it. So it's a really cool area of the brain where interoception is, and interoception is really important for us then feeling emotions and then feeling what we call proprioception, which is feeling our whole body. So it's just a really interesting area.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like recently we've touched upon just like, talking about like the awareness of your body and everything. So you were saying something about your heartbeat and then so can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So how do you measure interoception in somebody?
Yeah.
And what also does that relate to? And how do we know it comes from that area of the brain called the insula? So one of the things we're talking about, people that are right brain dominant, they're overly connected to their feelings.
Yeah.
Right? So they may be hyper aware of pain or when they're uncomfortable, or they may overread signals in their body, or they may, judge themselves as being bigger or uglier or uncomfortable. And there's a sense of disgust that also is a big right brain emotion. So feeling any right brain emotion is also connected to that. So the right brain emotions that we've talked about a lot, sadness, fear, shame, guilt, embarrassment, rejection, sensitivity, disgust, but also empathy and love and connection and attachment, which is the main driver. So there was studies looking at people, and one of the tests was what's called heartbeat detection test. And it was a test where they, played in the ear of somebody a beat, like a sound. And the sound was either synchronous with their heart or it was like a beat off of their heart. So it was not synchronous. And they asked the person, they had a button that they could push, that to push the button when the sound was synchronous with your heart and not push it when it wasn't synchronous, or something like that, vice versa. And what they found was that some people were really good at it. Some people were right on, like they knew exactly what their heartbeat was, and other people were terrible, like completely off. And then other people naturally had a mixture. The people that were really good at it, they also gave them tests of an empathy test that they took. And they found that the people that were best with heartbeat perception also scored highest in empathy.
Weird.
And then when they did an MRI on them, they found that their right brain, their insula, was larger than the other people.
Wow.
And there's a specialized cell in the insula called von Economo cells. These are the most sophisticated brain cells that we have. And really us and like the highest level of primates are the only animals that even have these cells.
Okay.
And they don't develop in us until we're around 4. And around 4 is when we develop what's called theory of mind, where we can kind of take somebody else's perspective, which is the basis of empathy, right? Empathy is, I can empathize. It's different than sympathizing. Sympathizing is I feel bad for you. Mm-hmm. Empathy is I literally feel what you feel.
Right. Okay.
Like I'm taking your perspective on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to do that, those cells have something to do with that. And being able to read other people's body emotions and facial expressions, and being able to then take that person's perspective. So like if I see you smile, literally I will actually smile. Like if I had little electrodes on my face, and when you smiled like that, my cheeks would contract a little bit like yours. But I wouldn't know I was doing that consciously.
Yeah.
I wouldn't see it, but it could be registered. But in my brain's going, oh, those cheeks contracted. And that's what you do when you smile. She's smiling. So when I smile, I'm happy. And so that's how I know what she's feeling.
And you're empathizing, like your body actually
literally mimicking it.
You know when people sorry, I'm not going off point, but they say that you can tell if someone's like a sociopath if they don't yawn when you yawn.
Well,
is that a thing?
It is a thing, but it's not just sociopath.
I just want to say I always yawn.
It's also schizophrenics, and it's also many people on the autism spectrum. It's called contagious yawning.
Yeah.
And there are certain people that don't do that. And basically, it's a right brain thing to be able to mimic.
I'm trying so hard not to yawn now. And no one even yawned.
See,
but that's because I'm so empathetic. I'm just kidding.
Yes. You must be a right brain dominant person.
Okay, sorry, keep going.
So interoception is this is the area of the brain where it's the first thing that comes on in a child. And so a lot of people that I work with, especially people that have right brain deficits, they lack or are really severely deficient in interoception. Okay. They don't feel their body.
And that would also be the people that don't yawn when other people yawn.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I just had a mom the other day, and we were working with her child, and she said when he was 3 years old, he had got a 3rd-degree burn on his leg. Like it literally burned through his skin and down to the muscle, and it was horrible looking. And she was so upset. Child didn't cry at all. And she brought him to the hospital, and the people were like, oh man, your son is so cool. He's so tough. And she was like, no, there's something wrong. He's not... He should be in excruciating pain right now, right? And, now he's a nonverbal autistic kid. And she kind of was like, there's something wrong here.
Yeah, that he's not reacting.
Yeah, and then we get a lot of kids, those same kids that may not eat or have what we call failure to thrive. They literally don't feel hungry. They don't feel thirsty. They don't have a sense of smell. Some of them not at all. They don't smell anything. don't feel. I had one kid that was 14 years old and he was autistic, and he was verbal though. And the mom, I'm talking to her about these things, and the mom says to me, he overdrinks water. He always had his whole life. But they lived in Puerto Rico, and she said, but it's hot, so I felt like he was thirsty all the time. And then I realized that he wasn't thirsty. No one could be that thirsty. And so she said to him, you drink too much water, only drink when you're thirsty. And he looked at her and he said, how do I know when I'm thirsty?
Oh, wow.
So just imagine that. So remember, the right brain develops things subconsciously. We don't remember learning things with our right brain, especially in the first 3 years of life, which is where we get interoception and where we learn about our early emotions and socializing and emotional regulation. We don't remember that we actually had to learn those things at some point and that somebody helped us learn it, which is part of the attachment dynamic in parents and their children. And what he was describing was what we all take for granted. Like, what do you mean he doesn't know when he's thirsty? Everybody knows when they're thirsty.
Yeah.
Everybody knows when they're hungry. Everybody knows when they're in pain or hot. Like, how can you not know that? I mean, most people would just think everybody knows it. We just know it. No, some people don't just know it. They never learned it. It never developed in that area of the brain. And that area is that right insula. And this is also where we become self-aware. So that right around 18 months to 2 years, a child should start to recognize themselves in a mirror or in a picture. Remember, we were just with Dallas and talking about his kids and how his son was able to recognize himself, and he looked at himself in the clothing and he touched his own body, which means he knows it was him, not another child. Yeah. And that he could recognize himself in a picture. And he was about 21 months old. And that's right around when it would. And so what is happening, the insula and the frontal lobe, so the anterior insula, is the area where we feel self-awareness. So in the back of the insula is where we feel all those sensations. We feel all the sensations, and then we start to feel emotions, like those right brain emotions we talked about. And then we're developing more in the frontal part, like this cognitive ability to have this self-awareness, and then that leads to empathy, where we're connected to ourself. And we know we're a self, and we know we're an individual person. Now, if you get someone that's right brain dominant, those early sensations are too strong. This may be a child that's always colicky or pain or crying all the time, or really hypersensitive or really emotional. I get parents will come in and they're like, from the time this child was an infant, they were just yelling. They were always emotional, like always getting upset easily over things. And it's because they're hypersensitive to their body. And then they become hypersensitive to their emotions. And then they may become hypersensitive to other people's emotions, and they overread them. And that's where, I told you about the salience network and people with dyslexia, that creates this, overwhelming stress response in their body.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think I have that. Right? I don't know.
Yeah, no. Well, that's what we talked about. When you have that social anxiety, that people are going to judge you. Yeah. And that fear of being judged by others and feeling like you're being judged, or you judge yourself too harshly. We said metacognition was the ability to judge yourself. People that are right brain dominant tend to overjudge themselves and tend to be, their own harshest critic. Yeah. Or like in little kids, I see it where parents will be like, oh yeah, this child comes home and just says everybody in school hates them, or the teacher doesn't like them. Or they'll say like, I'm stupid, I'm terrible, I'm no good. Most little kids don't say that. Right. Little kids that are saying that, they're probably overly right brain aware. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So you said something about not feeling pain, right? Like they did a study about where you feel pain or something. So, sorry, he said, so he was explaining a lot of this, and he gets really excited when he gets to talk about cool topics like this. And then we were like just talking about it at dinner, and then I was like, hold on, let me write these things down. And then I like looked at my notes today, and it was like pain, heartbeat, insula, spelt wrong. And I was like, why did I even write notes? I don't have any idea what these mean.
Did you write about
I
psychophobia?
thought I like wrote like everything down that you said. It was like 2 words that were spelt wrong.
It wasn't psychophobia and physicosis?
No, it wasn't this time, but basically the same thing.
Well, you got this right because you mentioned it to me, Wilder Penfield.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I wrote, yeah, you'd be shocked at how I spelt that, but let's just be proud of the fact that I wrote it at all.
You have to show me.
I'll show you later.
So we're going to be making shirts up, guys. And on those shirts, we want to put something on the back.
Yeah.
And so we'll take suggestions, right?
Yeah.
Like they can give us suggestions.
Yeah,
So-
if you guys have sayings that we've said or things, whatever, you just
Or if you want to see certain words spelled a certain way.
yeah, if you want to see the way I spell certain words and have that on a shirt, it's
And
a very
we're
niche
not-
thing
and
to
listen,
want. But
we are not making fun of people that are truly dyslexic. Obviously, we're here to help them.
yes,
But
here I am
there
in
you are.
broad
But-
daylight.
But you can do it because you wrote it. So anyway, there's this guy, Wilder Penfield. He was a neurosurgeon, in like the 30s to 50s, something around there, over a period of about 20 years or so, and thousands of patients. And so what he would do is when he was doing brain surgery, where these people had their skulls open and they were not under general anesthesia, they had agreed to be part of an experimentation where he would take these electrical probes and he would touch parts of their brain. And he'd be like, what do you feel? Or would it move a part of their body? And so in the parietal lobe, that's our sensory lobe part of our brain, where we feel everything, we literally have a map called a homunculus. It's literally a 3D distorted map of our body in our brain, and literally lays, like the whole body lays like along that strip.
Okay.
And
of the
it's
homunculus.
Homunculus, right? Yeah, because homo means human, so a mouse would be like a mouseunculus.
Oh, well, look at that. You just cracked yourself up with that.
That's a neuroanatomy joke.
Wow, good one, Dad.
Your mother would say, you and your neuro nerd friends. Yeah, that's funny to you guys, right?
Oh, God, yeah. You and him and my brother with their jokes back and forth.
Yeah. So anyway, he was able to map out all of the body parts by people saying, yeah, I feel this or whatever. And in doing that, the only sensation they never said they felt, they would feel like warm or cold. They would feel like, like tingling or pressure. But the one thing they never felt was pain. And so it wasn't until he went under the surface of the brain into the insula and stimulated the insula that someone actually felt pain. So pain is only felt in the insula.
Wait, and where's the insula?
It's underneath the brain, underneath the cortex. And it's like we have like the frontal lobe has a peak to it. The parietal lobe has a peak to it. And the temporal lobe has a peak to it. Now, the frontal lobe is where we have where all of our cognitive thinking and motor ability. Parietal lobe is where all our sensory information is. And the temporal lobe is where we have things like smell and taste, but also where hearing and a lot of musical abilities come from that. And so they all kind of peak, and right under that is the insula. Okay. And it's on the right and the left, and they do different things. But the right insula is really that area that's really connected with self-awareness. So when we become self-aware, so people that lack self-awareness, like you talked about psychopaths, or you talk about some people that might be schizophrenic, or in some cases, people with autism, they don't realize, they don't really feel embodied. We gain what's called body ownership. Mm-hmm. That's when you recognize yourself in a mirror, and that's mirror self-recognition. It's also around the same time that you're going to develop these von Economo cells that also is related to yawning, right?
Okay.
But the idea, though, is that, so if you feel pain in your body, or you feel pain inside, like emotional pain really is only found in that area too.
Okay. So, but like what you're implying is that like pain is More like emotional?
Yeah, very good. And pain is really, and that's actually what the research has shown, is that pain is a sensation, but it's almost also like an emotion. But it's really like interoception. It's like feeling, it's not as clear as, let's say, temperature but it is, because it's not localized, right? We can localize things, and there is some localization in the brain. So we can have local pain, like we know, on my arm, I hurt my arm. But then, like, if you're feeling like sick to your stomach, or if you're feeling kind of like bloated, it's kind of like you're feeling that everywhere.
Yeah.
And when you're in emotional pain, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But you're feeling it in that same part of your body, but you're not. So it's really like, that's why pain can be so difficult, an emotional pain. And that's what we had talked to that might lead to some people like doing cutting and things like that.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I feel like, yeah, in the times that I did struggle with that, shocker, I struggled with another thing. But yeah, in the times that I struggled with cutting, I feel like it was because I was feeling really, really like shameful or something. So yeah, like you put it all in one spot, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because those feelings like shame or guilt or whatever, they're everywhere. You know what I mean? That you just feel like they're overwhelming. They're not any one place.
That's pretty interesting though, because what's his name? That actor that he was in The Town. He's such a G.
In The Town? With Ben Affleck?
Yeah.
Jack?
No. He got hit by a snowmobile, like a giant
Jeremy Renner?
Yes.
Yeah, Hawkman.
He's such a badass. So he was just
Hawkeye.
on he was just on Joe Rogan, like, and he was talking about how he was talking about his whole injury and everything he went through, because he went into like a coma and everything.
Yeah, like ran himself over.
Yeah, with like a 16,000-pound snowmobile or something. It's a crazy story. But anyway, that's all to say, Joe Rogan was like asking him like what was like the most painful part of all of that, like the most painful surgery and all those things. And he was like saying that a part where I think where he had to get like screws taken out of his mouth or something was the most painful part, not because it hurt the most, but because he's a very visual person, that knowing what was happening and being able to visualize like what was happening to him was like he was like it was unbearable.
Well, let's go back to Wilder Penfield and I'll explain that. So there is this 3D distorted map. So let's look at the whole map. Let's say it's a third of, like, let's say it's, the whole body, and the legs and the body and the trunk are small.
Yeah.
The biggest part of the whole map, not even close, it's probably a third of the whole map, is the face and the lips and the tongue and the mouth.
Okay.
So we feel that like so much more than any other part of our body. And so also when it comes to, there's not only a sensory map, then there's a motor map, right? So first we feel a part of our body, and then we develop a motor map to be able to move that part of our body. So same thing from the motor map, the tongue and the mouth and the lips is the biggest part of the map. And then the next biggest part of the map is our hand and our fingers and our arm. So being able to point and being able to do things with our fingers and our hands and fine motor skill and speaking we need so much ongoing sensory feedback, and we need so much movement, and we move them more than your tongue probably moves more than any other muscle in your body other than your heart.
There is a meme where someone says, I bet if you looked at anything and it showed a bunch of things. It showed like a stop sign. It showed like a brick wall. It showed like whatever. And it was like, I bet that if you thought about licking any of these things, you would know exactly what it would feel like. And then I thought about it and I was like, that's true. Like, yeah. And then you just look at anything, but I guess because you're like hyper aware.
And you think about babies and animals, right? Everything goes in the mouth. Animals touch and lick everything. And so, but this is really fascinating because when I talk to, let's say, a parent of a non-speaking child with autism.
Yeah.
And I go through this, right? So first we develop interoception, this sense of self-awareness, feeling our body. And then that leads to development of right brain emotions and ultimately self-awareness and what we call body ownership. But at the same time, then we're developing in this parietal lobe and in the balance of the parietal lobe, a map of our body, a 3D map. And in the right brain, we develop a whole map. So we become a whole person in our right brain, right? So we become a whole individual person in the insula and in the right brain. And then once we are connected and we can feel it, now we can move that body. And now we develop a map of how to move our body. And the mouth and the tongues and the lips are by far the biggest part, and then the finger and the hand. So when I get a kid that's non-speaking autism, then I tell the parents that the reason why they don't speak is that. That's why they don't speak. Not that they don't have all the words. They do. All the words are there in their left brain, and their left brain is overactive. But they don't speak because they don't develop interoception at the proper level, and then it limits or delays their ability to be fully self-aware, and then they don't develop this proprioceptive 3D image of their body, and especially in their mouth and their hand. So they can't point to show people what they want, or they may point in the wrong way, and they can't speak, but they know all the words, and they can't move their body because they don't feel it. And this is, been really the source of a lot of my work for a couple of years on trying to understand why people with autism can't speak. And I knew it wasn't a left brain. I knew it was a right brain. But this is huge because when they do spell for us, like we get them to spell and type, we talked about that, they say, I don't feel my mouth. I don't feel my tongue. I don't know where it is. And that they tell us that's one of the reasons why they can't speak. Or they'll say, I don't know where my hand is so I can't point. That's why we may have to touch them for them to be able to spell. Because when you touch their arm, then their brain in their parietal lobe says, oh, there's my arm. So now we can localize it, and then they can move it. And then they can spell the words that are already there. But in right brain dominant people, it's the opposite. They're hyper connected to their body, hyper aware of their body.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming to them. And they're hyper aware of other people's emotions. And they over mimic and they over interpret other people's facial expressions. And, like we've talked about, like you can see like a little eye roll in somebody, or you can just look at someone's facial expression and instantly know what they're thinking.
Oh, yeah. I would just want to say, well, because my friend Sydney told my dad recently that I was like, because they were making fun of me for being overly aware of people, and maybe I'm like making things up or something. But remember, Sydney told you that we were at a bar and this girl was making a really like rude face at us when we were talking to her guy friends. Anyway, that's all to say, I was right. Found out that girl doesn't like us, and she was looking at us weird like that. So yeah, I pick up on those small things, but normally I think maybe they're accurate. But I do overthink what people said.
Right. You may be right, but you also overinterpret it.
Yes.
Right?
I just wanted to say I was right about that one time.
You're right about that. Sydney, she's right. And to that girl, you're not nice.
You're not nice.
No. We don't. We're mad at you.
We're mad at you. But yeah, there was another question I had about that. Oh, well, okay. So all of that is very interesting because I also think I'm like how I just got my LASIK done.
Yeah.
The idea of me lying under there while they were like touching my eye like that, like maybe in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't like that big of a surgery. I mean, it was very painful afterwards for sure, but that was my worst nightmare what happened. Like, but I think because I visually could see everything that was happening like in my head, like I'm like, oh my God, I know what they're doing to my eye right now, and that's disgusting. And it like made me sick. And it was, and like I think that's probably the worst. I'd rather anything else happen than have to do that again.
Well, that's where you get a lot of right brain dominant kids, and the parents will come in and say, like, trying to get like draw blood in this child is like a nightmare.
Oh, freaks me out. Yeah.
And the fear of
my arms, like, or like a needle going into like your arm. Yeah.
Your mother's like that too. She can't even watch it on TV.
Oh God.
Yeah. I was like that too when I was younger. the thought of blood made me pass out once when I was in in 6th grade. I think I was in science class. And they thought I had a seizure, but it was really just I fainted because of thinking about blood. Really, I was just thinking about it. The teacher was talking about blood, and I remember I just went, oop, out, right? And so when I was in school, doing my internship, they had people that needed to be phlebotomists, meaning part of our training was that we drew blood and we had to order blood draws, and we need to be able to interpret blood on our patients. So in school, they asked people to volunteer to become someone who would draw blood. And I hated so much the idea of getting blood drawn from me. And I knew I wanted to get over that. I didn't want to pass out when I was and so I actually became a phlebotomist. And in doing that, so let's say there was 5 of us in the clinic who had never done this before. And how do you learn how to become a phlebotomist? How do you learn to draw blood? I mean, you just got to stick a needle in someone's arm.
Oh my God.
Right?
Yeah.
And you've never done that before. You're not going to be good at it. It's going to hurt, right? But there's no way you can't. I mean, they have rubber arms and things, I think, for people, but they didn't have that for us, right?
Okay.
This was a long time ago.
Real arms.
Right. And so you had to get something like 20 blood draws before you would be allowed to do it. And so you had to go to somebody and say, hey, can I draw blood on you? And they'd say, well, yeah, but I have to be able to draw blood on you.
Oh.
So if you wanted to get 20 blood draws, you had to give up 20 blood draws. So that means you had to get stuck 20 times in doing that. So needless to say,
that's how you got over it?
I got over it, yeah.
Exposure therapy,
yeah.
But so coming back to the interoception, that you claim to be a very right brain person. Mom disagrees, but whatever. She's not here today, so you're a right brain person. This is air quotes. So you're saying that the more like a right brain you are, the more you can feel your body and the more you can visualize things in your head, because you're saying that pain really only comes from the insula. When you're a more right brain person, you're more emotionally, like you could feel other people's emotions, you could feel pain, you could feel whatever. And so that's why you would be hyper aware of things like that.
Yes. And let's tie it into the right brain songwriters. So the insula is bordered by the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, and the temporal lobe, right?
Okay.
So the frontal lobe, we said it's a lot of that idea of self-awareness and empathy and that kind of being connection to others, socialization. The parietal lobe is that feeling of our body, and then proprioception, the ability to know where our body is in space and spatial awareness and visual, spatial, and athletics. The temporal lobe is where you have sound. So hearing music, writing music, and being able to tap into your emotions and being able to tap into pain, I believe is that border of the insula and the temporal lobe. And that's where a songwriter lives.
Okay.
That's where songwriting comes from.
Bordering the
insula temporal lobe.
Yeah.
Yeah. That border there, that area of the brain on the right side.
Uh-huh.
Where you have the temporal lobe, which is where you hear sound and melodies, and where the right brain picks up on that, and tone of voice and prosody and all of that. And then bordering the insula, where you feel emotion, these right brain emotions and these sensations and pain and self-awareness and awareness of other people and empathy. That border lives on that. And I believe that's where songwriting comes from, that area of the brain.
Interesting. I can't help but think about these borders as just those charts you'd make in school that just like overlap each other.
Yeah.
And then the insula's in the middle, I guess.
Yeah, it is. It's actually, because it's pretty wild. You know, the brain, as it grows, it folds upon itself because it's in a limited space in the skull, and we have these big brains. So as they're growing, it literally starts out with a surface, but then as that surface grows, it folds on top of itself. And the insula is where the surface started, and then everything folds on top of it. So it's under that, but it's still part of the same surface. You understand?
Yeah.
And if you literally cut like a circle in the brain on the side that takes off the tip of the frontal, parietal, and temporal lobe, it's called the circular cortex, and you remove it, underneath is the insula. And so that border of where all those things lay on top of it is the border of the insula and the frontal, temporal. But I think that insula temporal lobe is really the heart of songwriting. And that's also where you get in touch with all those feelings and those emotions and those painful emotions and that self-awareness, and then that awareness of others, and all the things that you guys have talked about on this podcast, about how painful it is to write songs sometimes, and how painful and how it might be so difficult to do that in front of people, and that and the idea of struggling with self-esteem. I think it's all in that area of the brain, but that's also where the songwriting gift comes from, hearing sounds and not the other side. And it's also been shown that when there's a deficit on the left insula, that's related to dyslexia.
Look, I can't figure that out.
Can you spell it out?
No, I can't.
And the last thing.
Does insula have a U in it?
Yes.
Oh.
ISULA, or some people look at it as the insular, LAR. But the last thing that we'll talk about that also connects with it is there's a new term in immunology and neuroimmunology, in the future of where immunology is going, understanding that the brain actually takes the lead, is that there's a term now called immunoception, which means that the insula, and especially the right insula and the left insula, but is the area where we also monitor what's happening in our immune system in our brain. And we perceive when there's inflammation or illness, and then we also can trigger anti-inflammation or healing. And it all happens in that area called the insula. So if we have any disruption of our immune system, the right insula in particular is more about anti-inflammation, reducing inflammation. So when you have somebody that has like autoimmune issues, like we had talked about, hypothyroid, Hashimoto's, eczema, food sensitivities, we often see that they have an overactive sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic is really what causes us to feel safe and calm and relaxed and digest our food. That is the right insula, regulates that. And it also regulates reducing inflammation so that we stop any of the destructive process. So disruptions in the immune system and not being able to register what's happening in our immune system is also part of that same area of the brain.
Okay.
It's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is. That's why it's such a cool area that I'm really researching a lot and have been. I wrote a couple of big papers on it in the last couple of years.
Does that play into like how someone could heal themselves by like thinking in a certain way, or vice versa, make themselves sick by thinking in a certain way?
Yeah, psychosomatic illnesses. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Matter of fact, that's a very good point that I've never actually read much in the literature about the insula also being an area where psychosomatic illness primarily comes from. So
I'm a doctor,
you just came up with that.
What can I do? This is crazy.
Look at that. See, that's that intuitiveness of you, that ability to see the big picture and connect the dots.
There you go.
In a big way. That's actually really cool, Alice.
Thanks.
Yeah. I might put you on my next research paper about that.
If you need me to, I'm a writer.
We gotta tap into that.
Okay. Well, I think we covered a lot there.
Yep. I think it's an area we'll talk about more, but it just gives people a good background in that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great.
All right.
What a beautiful episode.
Okay.
All right. I love you.
Cool. Love you too, honey.
Bye.
Bye.